Well, hello, friend, and thank you so much for joining me for today's 15-minute franchisee interview. So let's go ahead and get started. Please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you're located, the number of territories that you own, and when you became a right at home owner.
My name's Josh Steiner. Thank you, Jenna. My name's Josh Steiner. I'm in Rays Lake, Illinois. We own one territory. I'm co-owner with my brother, Mike Steiner. He has owned it the last 13 years or so. I just became an owner over the last year.
Nice. All right. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background before joining your brother in this business?
So before joining Mike, I practiced law in Colorado for about 30 years. And 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, look, more than that, about 7 years ago, he was saying, "Hey, why don't we get the right at home in Fort Collins or do something?" He wanted to get me in the business, and
Mhm.
I had a pretty good gig, so I really didn't want to. I had my own firm in Denver, and it was going well. And then for the last few years, I just started to rethink really what I wanted to do. I had a teenage daughter who was 16 at the time, who barely gets to spend time with her two grandmothers that live in the Chicago area, live
Mhm.
very close to us. One since passed, but my daughter got to spend a year and a half with her and spent more time with her in that year and a half than she had her first 16 years of life. So
Mhm.
that was one of the reasons I moved out, but it was kind of a joint thing. Switched careers. I was ready for the change. I called my brother a couple years ago and said, "What would it look like me coming out here?"
Mhm.
And we worked together for a year to make sure we could work together, and things were going smoothly. And I learned the business, and everything worked out well. And now we're co-owners. So it was just a huge change a couple years ago. And I'm really glad I made it. So.
And it sounds like family had a lot to do with that decision. Glad that you were able to have that time. In thinking about that decision making process, because you're right, it is a big shift, right?
Yeah.
Um, what was it that made you realize right at home was going to be your home?
So when I made the call to him, I remember this because I actually brought on a law partner into my firm at the time. We had been partners, and I started a different firm. We were together about 8 years, and he remembers it because it was Halloween night. And he's like, "My heart sank when you called because I called and said, hey, my brother wants me to come out next May. Can we make that happen?" And he's like, "Yeah, I understand." Then
Mm.
2 weeks later, Mike said, "I lost my HR person. Can you be out here by January?" Which we made happen. My daughter was all on board and up for it, and so was my former partner. But it's very different for me, having done my time in a unique situation, I think. Why
Hmm.
it was right at home for me. It wasn't really anything that I researched and wasn't looking to maybe get into a franchise or even necessarily this field. It
Hmm.
was prompting from my brother about how much he loved it and how gratifying it was for him. And I did civil litigation for 30 years. My clients loved me. I had great relationships for 20 years with them, 30 years, but it's not like they were really super happy when I was
Hmm.
involved with their cases too. So people weren't generally very psyched about having to go to litigation. Much different here, where even if someone's not hiring me, I get a pretty good feeling about helping people, whether it's like on a Sunday morning and they don't know what to do, it's overwhelming, and we've gone through it ourselves in our family with our mom and our dad years ago. But it's an overwhelming time. Um,
Hmm.
so uh, that I made the jump because my brother pushed it so not so hard to come and do it, told
Hmm.
me what he thought about it, and filled me in, educated me on what he did and what I'd be doing. And it sounded like if I was going to do something else, I was just, let's jump into it, let's do it. And so I just decided to pull the trigger because I thought that it would be a good move, and it's everything that I've expected and more.
Oh, it's
So
wonderful to hear. I'm glad to hear that.
yeah.
And so, in thinking about a typical day for you now, what does that look like?
And then that's another thing. Every right at home operates very differently as far as how hands-on the owners are and everything. If you end up joining the organization, I don't know how they say it. Work on working on the business, not in the business, but it depends what kind of owner you are. and I work in the business. So I do a lot of the marketing. Our territory is not that large, so I handle almost all the marketing. I do a lot of the intakes, a lot of the assessments. We also have somebody else that does that during hours as much as he can, and he, training too. But if it's an after hours call or that type of thing, I generally will take it. I think it's important, and I think it really helps a lot of times getting the clients if an owner is taking the call. But a lot of people hiring marketing people or salespeople, which is fine. And overall management, general management, I guess, of our all of our office staff. I had started out where I did for the first year HR. I ran. That's why he needed me to come out a month because his HR person had left. So I got thrown into that, which was incredibly overwhelming. Just everything was kind of intense, but it was good. I thought that was a good place for me to start for the year because it really is very different than dealing with clients and marketing and sales. But then after that, we ended up hiring another person, and I've kind of given most of the HR duties to the person we hired, Karen. And she's doing a wonderful job. So that's taken a lot off my plate and freed me up to do more of the marketing, more of the visits, doing community efforts, things like that to get our name more recognized. My brother's already done a wonderful job with that. Like I said, it's kind of unique, the system I came into, because he runs a really good store. I don't know where we were. It was my first performance group. And Michelle Rankin was there. And she was just telling me about another franchise she's part of. And she just said it really makes you appreciate being with a franchise that actually supports you, because the other one she was talking about is terrible. But anyway, so yes, I don't know if I answered your question, but I kind of might have gone off of it.
Yeah, so you wear a lot of hats, but it sounds like you're learning a lot through the process. So thank you for sharing. And in thinking about the support structure that you have received so far in your journey with us, what part of the support structure do you feel it has been most valuable to you?
Well, I mean, I'm one thing that's sticking out right now is just having access to, other owners as well in the network to get feedback from them. But what I really have liked the last year are Lisa's sales boot camp. And for somebody like me, yeah, I had experience in other areas and other fields, but coming into this industry, that I don't know all the terminology very well. And sure, my brother taught it to me the first year, and I listened to maybe 50 hours of intake calls of him people at 9 o'clock at night. Hey, listen in. But still to get that lingo down, and that wasn't necessarily marketing. That's sales, talking to somebody, and that I have an experience with that over the years, even as an attorney. It's kind of sales. So that was very easy in learning how to talk to people, but knowing what to say and feeling confident in what I'm saying is a different story. And that's why I've really enjoyed those boot camp series for marketing and sales, because it just, even if I know something, it's not second nature yet. And the repetitive nature of it is really useful. And plus, she's just wonderful. They have great input and great ideas on those. I'd highly recommend to any existing owner or anything. I think they're wonderful. Daniel Bourne, my brother, that's I think one of his coaches. I think he's still the coach. I know it switched a couple times, but even when it didn't, we still always just reach out to Daniel. And response time's amazing always. Whenever we have questions, corporate answers them for us. And that's really a nice resource to kind of get that. Having the relationship with Pulcinelli is huge, so that we can kind of keep up to speed. I really don't have to do much digging outside of monitoring Pulcinelli and when right at home, but usually goes over that stuff on Takeoff Tuesdays, but generally it's on a Pulcinelli webinar. But I love those. I don't love them. I actually don't really like them that much, but I get a lot from them. And because it's important stuff that otherwise I'd have to be, reading a bunch of whatever other legal authorities I could to find out what new laws are coming through and how they're being handled. So that's actually super important to do. And I remember when I was at Residence Week, I was telling everybody there, you need to make sure and follow up and always attend those things because they're important, and they're state specific too, which is kind of nice. So no, it's just you get good support. Margaret, all the way to the top. It's just everybody's open to having a discussion with you and giving you their input on any questions you have from the CEO down.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And these interviews are resources that we use often. And as prospects are thinking and considering right at home as their home, what would be a piece of advice that you would like to share with them?
Oh, probably the same thing that a lot of the super successful owners around the country, and I've met a lot of them just over the couple of years, going to home improvement, things like that. I would go to home improvement. You'll get something out of it, if anything, from speaking with other owners. But more importantly, I would follow the general guidelines the corporate lays out for you to be a success. Because if you at least follow that, yes, every territory is different, and you have to fine tune processes to make sure what works for you is what works for you. It may not work in the area of the country, but you do get really good guidelines from corporate, and you should follow those guidelines, and you'd be a success. You run a good place, and you'd be happy about it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And it has been an absolute pleasure, Josh, to meet with you today. And I so appreciate you taking time out of your day to meet with me.